Hey everyone, it's Tom here, and to join me today to talk about Fallout 76 is Rich.
Hello there, how you doing?
Pretty good. It's been a long week. Obviously we're focused on Red Dead Redemption 2, but in the midst of all that, we had a beta of Fallout 76 kind of emerge at midnight UK time, at a more sociable time on the US side. So we've been keeping tabs on that, and there's a few findings that have come to light basically from that.
Okay, yeah, so fair enough. Well, first of all, we did have access to some early footage of a press build, and we did a video on that a couple of weeks ago, but this was not public-facing code, so it wasn't really ready for, in-depth performance analysis and whatnot. But basically, the beta is out. This is public-facing code. Xbox users are looking at this right now. And yeah, from our perspective, it is fair game to get a look at how Fallout 76 is now shaping up on the Xbox platforms. So you actually played it on both the base model and the X, right?
That's right. There was a 4-hour slot on the night that I had to play it, so I divided time evenly between the base and the X. There is a PS4 and PC beta to come, but for now obviously we're just focusing on the Xbox versions. It is kind of a surprise coming to this after that preview build, which we didn't go into too much depth on the performance side. It is better, I'm just going to say that outright, it is better on this build frame rate wise from what I can see. Visually, I mean, it's the same setup as before. We got to see like the opening tutorial missions basically, which essentially has you going through fairly mundane tasks, if I'm being honest. We had to cook steaks, we had to boil dirty water, and a lot of it kind of goes into the depths of night as well, so it never looks at its best. But it does have some highlights, and some of the points that really stood out to me were, this is the same engine as Fallout 4, and you can see all the pros and cons that come with that.
So pros and cons then, well, let's go through them in turn then. What are you seeing there?
Pros? Well, it keeps that nice volumetric lighting we had in Fallout 4, and bear in mind this is essentially pitched as the multiplayer version of Fallout 4. This isn't based on the Elder Scrolls Online engine or anything like that. This comes from the Creation engine. But yeah, it just feels very strange in terms of the way it's constructed. You go into a Fallout game expecting NPCs to fill out the lore, but here you've got this netcode bolted on top, which expects the other players in an online instance to kind of fill out the excitement in that way. So it's a very surreal take on the Fallout series, but with that said, the game still has the same quirks and characteristics of Fallout 4, so if you saw our analysis on that, then it's kind of, it follows suit. So let's get the base Xbox One going here. We got the same rendering setup as before.
So yeah, it is similar to the original Fallout 4 on Xbox One there, where it is essentially 1080p resolution. However, there is a dynamic resolution scaling setup which does adjust horizontal resolution. So I think we've logged the minimum there as 1440 by 1080, is that right?
Yeah, it seems to be the case at 75% on that horizontal there. Obviously you pick it from the stress point, so that was during this gunfight, which I'll put on your screens now.
Fair enough, and let's talk about the Xbox One X then. In the preview build you logged that it was also using dynamic resolution scaling. And this time around in this beta, you've got a minimum of 3200 by 2160, rising to full 4K. Is that the same as the preview, or is it different?
In the preview we saw a lot of 4K, to be honest, and even here is like the majority of the time it is just 4K. I had to really pick out a proper stress point to find that low 3200 by 2160 number. Kudos to Bethesda for making that happen. It's actually very close to 4K most of the time.
Okay, so there were some oddities in the preview. For example, when you're in the interior structures, there didn't seem to be much in the way of shading, shadows and whatnot. What's the situation in the beta? Any improvements there?
It's basically the same deal as Fallout 4 in that sense. Yeah, it was very strange this time because everything was so lacking in texture quality and detail. There was this segment in a hotel room which was like just a complete mess artistically, oversaturated, and yeah, no shadows as well. That is just the way the engine works, basically. Shadows only appear when you're outside and you're kind of beholden to the time of day system.
I think obviously the big thing from the preview build, and to be fair, Bethesda did say that this would be improved, is the performance. Now, it's a difficult one, this, because Fallout 4 was far from a locked 30 frames per second, even with the multitude of patches that followed the initial release. And obviously we should expect things to get better on this one because it is still a beta version of the game. But let's bring up some performance metrics and see what we've got going on here.
Let's lead with Xbox One again, the base model. I think it's fair to say this one needs the most work. It's not the version we saw the X for the preview build. So this is all new. Yeah, it's not looking good for a number of reasons. The first one being that, well, it has the same stuttering as Fallout 4 did back in the day. If you remember, there were issues with that version as well when it came to like sound delay. Like when you pull a new gun out, you take fire, your sound will come out like a split second or two later. It sounds very strange and it does stick out, and that's not a problem on the X model. But in between all that, there are massive stutters, you know, proper 240 millisecond spikes and more, in fact.
Yeah, that's not good, is it? It's not particularly impressive. So in terms of those stutters, in the original Fallout 4, we kind of determined that some of those were storage related, because you could run the game on an external hard drive and it would run smoother. You could run it on an SSD and essentially eliminate some of the stutters there. So do you think it's the same case here?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was minimized by putting an SSD into an external caddy and running Fallout from that, but it was still an issue, I think. So, and it's the same case here. I think most people will notice as you go through, and it usually happens in the midst of, you know, a big 20 FPS drop. So it just accentuates any bad performance that's going on at the time.
Yeah, and there is plenty of bad performance from the Xbox One clip I've seen, because essentially any time you are in an encounter with NPCs, with enemies, there seems to be big lurching performance drops when they're on screen, and it seems to be the case whenever there's any other people in the game as well.
Let's look at the X model. I think this is overall better. It is basically dropping in similar points. You know, the gunfights are usually the big problem, as you'd expect. Sort of 20 to 30 FPS rather than like the 10 FPS dips we get on the base model. But even with all that said, I think the consistency of it is better than what we saw in the preview build. It's just not good enough, but it is kind of an upward trajectory in terms of the quality of the experience.
So is there any further notes on this beta? I mean, obviously the issue is that you had a 4-hour window to test 2 versions of the game, and there was a great deal of intro tutorial stuff to wade through. So I don't know, is there the sense that we've still barely seen anything of the game?
Yeah, I think that's true. We need to kind of pace ourselves on this one in terms of the judgment. It is a sample. We've just taken 2 hours from each, so take that as you will. But it does give a sense of where things will be headed, certainly in terms of the stuttering and the general flow of the game and how it plays. I think is very telling. In terms of it being better than the preview from what I've seen so far, and there was an overlap in terms of the content between that preview and this beta. It is an improvement, and I think that bodes well for the final release, which isn't too far off now.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, there's 2 things here. First of all, yeah, I mean, we did run the performance numbers on the preview footage regardless, and I'd say that this is a lot better than what we were seeing there. So yes, you're right, there is an upward trajectory there. We are seeing improvement, and quite rapid improvement based on how recent that preview event was. But secondly, when you're talking about stuff like the audio stutter, the delays there, these are bugs that we kind of highlighted way back at the launch of Fallout 4 that still haven't been addressed moving into the new game, which is rather concerning.
Yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see, I guess, but it's wishful thinking to expect that those will be fixed given the history of the series. Bearing in mind this engine goes back essentially to games like Morrowind. There's traces of the code all the way back to those games. So there's a lot of legacy in there, and there's netcode bolted on top. Yeah, we'll have to see how it all pans out. This is a really interesting experimental direction for the team.
I think the PC version could be quite fascinating as well. The potential to maybe power past a lot of the issues we're seeing here if they do persist into the final version of the game. But that is a test for another time, I guess.
Right, I think that'll do for now, Rich. Thanks so much for joining me.
No problem whatsoever.
If you did enjoy this analysis, please feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to ring the bell to get notifications as each video lands. We have this on our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net if you wanted the source file, and of course if you want to get in touch, you can get in direct contact on Twitter. But until next time, from me and Rich, thanks for watching.